Okay, Dave, here we are with another podcast, but this time we are doing our first Kickers Club podcast, which is our new initiative from School of Kicking, which we are very, very excited about. And so we're going to catch some of your reflections on Kickers Club and why you feel motivated to do that, given some of your experiences of coaching. And then we're going to have some time for some questions. We've had some questions come in through our social media channels, and we will be fielding those and then encouraging more questions for our next podcast in a couple of weeks. But firstly, Dave, tell us, why are you excited about Kickers Club, this new global community and possibility of joining people together and sharing expertise and knowledge from yourself and also others into the future? Why are you up for it?
Well, I think that, funnily enough, yesterday I was working with Bryce and Lawson, two kickers, one graduate from the academy going into full-time, and the other one, Bryce Hegarty, and for the first time, I introduced a kind of a scale of Energy League on contact. Now, I've done it a long time ago, and of course, I tied it up with a Predator boot as well, and tried to illustrate that you don't have to come off as much to get the same amount of spin, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it blew their mind.
Is this on running spiral?
Yeah. Well, just standing still spirals now. We're just learning to just sort of hit 50, 60 meter spirals with a lot of hang time to create carnage downtown. That's essentially it, not all the time, but there are times when that can really turn a game around. And it was, and the other bit later on, I kind of dealing with this other guy, Nate, who's only just turned 13. So he's a bit like Thomas Taylor was 3-4 years ago. And I talked to him about knee flexion. And it seems to me that there is so much around learning a skill that sometimes little nuggets make the difference. And you can't set it out, because if I was to write down everything that I know about kicking, it'd be like a telephone directory. And 90% of it will be a complete waste of time for most people. But everybody would have a different 10%. And so this seems to be a great opportunity for kickers just to get together and say, I found that one, when I'm doing spirals, if I have that right foot, left hand, that stops me coming across. And I'm just hopeful that somebody else hears that. And then they go out and, I'm going to try that right. Gosh, and it sort of gets the thrill and discovering how to learn and to get excited about it. And the more I do this, the more I discover what people don't know, because we've made dramatic assumptions, and which is why kicking often stalls the development of kicking, because people don't know how to get to the next stage. I can kick okay, and I think rugby, in a way, a lot of coaches who perhaps don't understand a kicking development program, as long as the guy can kick, find touch, kick a few goals, that's fine, and we'll spend all the rest of the time doing something else. And yet, we all know that actually kicking can be great fun, for the first thing, which is awesome. There's great satisfaction and challenge with goal kicking and narrow angles and all the different things we can do. But at the very highest level, it actually wins World Cups. So there's a pretty good reason for this Kickers Club. And, I'm really rapt with the people that are involved. I've spoken to a few people about it, and they're going, yeah, count me in. So let's just put everything into the mix.
Yeah, so, and it's a special mix, isn't it? Because you've got your career of coaching, all the expertise that you've built up. You've got your kind of raw, as I hear in there now in your reflections, just your passion for learning and getting better, which is just a great human thing, isn't it? To be developing yourself and others is exhilarating, isn't it? When you make progress, you can see it. And of course, today with the technology available to connect across the world, it's a special mix, isn't it? And we're really excited about what might come from this over the next weeks, months, and years together. So it's a really exciting start. We're going to move on to questions. in a bit and take some. And obviously these podcasts are going to be in that sense collaborative, because we want the Kickers Club guys and girls to be firing us questions, and so we can think about it and then make some responses just to help with their learning. But I thought it'd be good for you just to give us a little bit of your story really of coaching. So I'm going to just ask a few questions, because I know you won't always be forthcoming with your own sort of personal journey, but I think it's great for those who are getting involved to understand a little bit of where you're coming from. Your first job before you were involved with professional sport was teaching, wasn't it? Give us you did teacher training. Paint a picture for us. What did you teach at school? What did you like about that? Just give us a couple of seconds on that, because I know that your thirst for learning, in a sense, is a generic thing actually that was kind of birthed in the education forum. But tell us a little bit about that.
The biggest single thing I gained out of teaching, which was probably where I learnt my best coaching skills, and the number one thing that I found, even with pupils that were potentially disruptive, had reason to not want to be there, etc., that if you respect people, you can demand respect back. And if you never talk down to anybody, so even when I was first starting coaching with Thomas Taylor, his dad sent me a picture of me, and of course I had to get down on one knee so that I could talk to him at a level. And I think that opens the learning. And I did a lot of, I would like to think, quite innovative things. And I think that's where I started off with, it's not a test to see if you've passed. It's a test that we're going to pass, and it's part of our journey. So that was a kind of subconscious birth that, learning is not a destination, it's a journey, and it's one to be enjoyed.
And that was one that you kind of, I guess, first discovered, I'm sure listeners would be interested to hear, in pretty tough schools in Bristol, wasn't it, at the time? You were dealing with, pretty demanding situations and characters, and obviously sport is a wonderful gift for people coming together and then fostering that journey as well. So that's kind of the roots of it. And it's great because two of our School of Kicking coaches are both in education at the moment, and so there's a real overlap. I know many will be connected to education, and obviously we all went to school as well, so we get that whole forum more than most, I think.
Yeah.
The game you were involved with, rugby, at the time it went professional. So I remember, obviously I was a kid and you were going to the 95 World Cup. Your first kind of famous pupils was Rob Andrew, you had Jonathan Webb and Stuart Barnes for the really ancient listeners today, but then you had Rob Andrew, the 95 World Cup. What was it like first getting involved with professional sport as the game turned, and then you were, I guess, offered a job out of it? How did that feel to be involved with that stage of the game?
Well, it's quite funny, actually. I mean, you mentioned Stuart Barnes and Jonathan Webb. What was great about those two, and I don't mean this in any disrespectful way at all, they were both graduates. They were both well educated. They were both intelligent. So often I would say, I'd like to try this, and I'd like you to think of it like this. And they were brilliant sounding boards for me. And I got involved in quite a lot of NLP and metaphors, although I didn't tag it as that, working with them. And it took off from there. And then I got involved with Bath and all sorts of bits and pieces. And then I suppose the 95 World Cup really was, because I nearly went to the World Cup with Australia, because I was actually commuting kind of backwards and forwards a little bit there, and loving the challenge, and coached for quite a time at St George Illawarra Rugby League in Sydney, and there was a lot of sort of collective stuff, and I think I don't realise how much I learned until I didn't do it, if you follow me. And interestingly, the more you coach, the more you learn, and the more different people you coach, the better your core offering becomes, which is why I like, still coaching Edward Fear, young lad, and I still in contact with Thomas Taylor, as well as obviously George and Johnny, but it's actually looking at that continuum and I'm starting to do the same here in Brisbane. But going in the '95 World Cup was, ironically, we met Australia in the quarterfinal, and Rob Andrew dropped a goal to put Australia out. Then, unfortunately, we met Jonah Lomu the next round, and he put us out. And then I suppose there is a sort of symmetry about it, because the next time I was involved in a World Cup was 2003, and Johnny Wilkinson dropped a goal to put them out again. So I suppose, but that journey was fraught, a lot of diversions, a lot of learning. The game was turning professional, but didn't know how to be professional. A lot of people jumped at the opportunity to fill time rather than actually work about what you need to be a rugby player. With all this time, so we'll get really fit. And I think that sometimes the fitness was overdone to the detriment of skills.
Yeah, and obviously the Northern Hemisphere was rather caught off guard, I think, looking back at the history. The Southern Hemisphere were a year ahead, weren't they, at least in their practice, and if further ahead in their thinking, perhaps. But I guess the 2003 moment was maybe a high point, or at least publicly a high point, in terms of, Rob Andrew introduced you to Johnny Wilkinson when he was 16, going up to Newcastle. You coached him through. But, your career spanned 3 World Cups and 3 Lions tours, so you've got a vast amount of experience as well. You've also done your PhD in performing under pressure, which I always found fascinating to hear you muse about coaching in different settings. Obviously, I don't know any other coach that talks about dolphin training and says, if I can train a dolphin to do this, I should be able to train a rugby player to do this, and obviously in time golfers and others as well. Perhaps just final comment here, just to bring us up to speed in terms of your own development as a coach. You've got Molinari in terms of golf, Luke Donald, other sport. I mean, we could go on and on. What is it that's kind of kept you motivated, do you feel, in terms of continually wanting to share stuff and learn stuff? Is it the thrill of like those eureka moments, or what is it for you that you love about this dynamic of learning?
I actually think that deep down somewhere, I'm still fundamentally a teacher. Now you can call me a coach, you can call me what you like, but so I see somebody at A, and I want to move them to B, and to get enthusiastic about going to C, and getting ready to D, and then hopefully he's going to tell me I want to go to E. I think I can do it, and I've always believed on trying to grow people rather than tell them what to do. And I think that made me, in some respects, a bit vulnerable, but in other respects, I think allowed me to get more people near their potential.
So good. And I guess, as we said at the start of this, in this moment, with technology, with your experience, with Kickers Club all coming together, we are creating something which is very special, and trusting that you can pass on and accelerate the learning of many people, because people are getting you in your kind of like a fine wine, hey, like vintage experience, many different contexts, many different disciplines now. So it's great to hear. Thanks for sharing that. I know that you don't always like sharing stuff like that. You'll always want to talk about the learner and help them in their experience, but I think it's good for those guys and girls engaging with Kickers Club just to sense a bit of your story as well. I'm sure there'll be much connection and resonance in those different sort of chapters of your career there. We're going to take a couple of questions now. So the first one here is James Humphreys, and he asks this: with so many ways to kick, how is it that you developed your kicking philosophy? With so many ways to kick, how is it you developed your kicking philosophy? And I guess if you watch on TV or see lots of different styles, and then you see this is the way that Dave Oyler would encourage you, how did you get to your philosophy, apart from the potted history that we just
yeah. Well, I think where it sort of crystallized itself was the game is becoming more and more physical in terms of demands of running, weights, and all the rest of it. So I had to look at a way that actually made the body efficient, not necessarily kick the ball as far as they possibly can. So I needed something that was physically efficient, and at the same time prior to that, probably my biggest challenge was when Wilkinson came back after a complete knee reconstruction. And we worked out medically that if he hyperextended, so in other words, as you kick, hyperextended, then he would have a very short career, because the hyperextension would really create problems with the knee. So we had to find a way to actually kick without hyperextending the knee, particularly in practice. And that gave birth to the kind of shunt where we jog along, hit the ball and land on a kicking foot straight away, so that the foot never straightens. There's hardly any hamstring at all. There's hardly very little backlift, but it's actually generated by the body. And at the same time, while that was going on, I was also asked by the West Coast Eagles to come and do some coaching of their goal kickers. So and they have the same thing where they run for miles and miles and miles and miles and miles, and then suddenly kicking is actually, quite a struggle. So I sort of introduced that, and then at the same time, Cristiano Ronaldo was suddenly making headway with just doing everything. But then I studied him very, very closely and actually looked at his plus points. Was incredible posture, no backswing, no follow through, but a follow along. And he would clip the ball with his body weight. And so if you sort of throw all that into the melting pot, then I thought, right, okay, I need to look at a way of developing this. And really, Wilkinson was the kind of pioneered it for me out of necessity. But very quickly, when I hear people saying, oh, I'm getting sore, my groin is sore and this, and I look at it closely, I say, well, hang on a minute, why not try this? And so that it sort of evolved to be a way of kicking that you can kick when you're tired, when you're sore, and you've done a heavy weight session, a big running session, and you can still do 10 kicks in front of the post at 40% effort with no strain on the body. And that's what I looked at. I didn't look for the longest kick. There's a lot of other ways I could have gone, but I looked at it as longevity of, can I get young kids to kick like this so they won't get injured?
And I guess we'll talk about this another time, but obviously robustness under pressure comes from the bigger muscle groups, not the smaller ones, et cetera, et cetera. So there's loads more benefits that we'll explore and be exploring and have explored. So, but that's great. Thanks for that. It's always good to hear the story. And I think sometimes visually you can look at stuff and be misled because you don't understand the context of what it's actually like to be an athlete, or even you don't understand your biomechanics well enough to appreciate how you've got there and the benefits of it. So that's fantastic. We'll just do one more question just for today. So this is TJ27. Dave's thoughts on kicking tees, particularly why most kickers are using high tees today. So here you go. Here's one. We get this one a lot through our workshops and on social media. And I know we have a bit of a joke around this one, but come on, give us what are your thoughts on kicking tees, particularly high ones.
Well, I like to have a tee. And if you look at the great kickers, particularly in rugby union, that kick the ball a long way. Okay, Wilkinson, low tee. England, Matt Burke, low tee. Paul Grayson, a low tee. Johnny Sexton, a low tee. George Ford, a low tee. So actually,
Emily Scarrett, low tee.
Low tee. And basically, if you want the kick to be as natural as possible and to be able to kick in a way that gets your kicking foot down and allows your pillar to go towards the target, you have to kick off a tee where the ball is quite low to the ground. Now, a lot of people go, well, how do you get height and all the rest of it? Well, there are a number of ways. And if you have I mean, it's not because of the question, but I have one, this is one I made earlier, kind of I just pull this screen down a little bit here. So this is the tee that we've developed, and it will be out soon. And the aim of this tee is to be able to place the ball, but be able to place it a number of different angles, forward, back, side, and so on. And if you look very, very carefully at the NFL and you look at the guys kicking the long field goals, if you look at it, the holder gets the ball, and if the kicker is right-footed coming in on this side, he tilts the ball like that. So the sweet spot, the bulge, is forming. And if you look at Wilkinson, he teaches, goes to the side and so on. So really what I'm saying is it might be lower than a high tee, because if you think about it, if you hit a high tee, the tendency is you can lean back and hit up. But it's so difficult to get the foot back down, you're bound to rotate. And once you rotate, controlling rotation is actually quite difficult under pressure. So that the along is a much better model under pressure.
So do you think the high tee is a shortcut to a feeling, hitting the ball higher, so it's more pleasing in the short term, but in the end, it limits what you can do, or what would you say?
Yeah, I think it is. I think that you become less educated as a kicker with the high tees. I mean, when I first went to the Reds, James O'Connor, Bryce, all had high tees. And when I explained to them, this is why, this is it. And then they suddenly realized the consistency of the strike, and the mishits were straighter. And that's a very, very important learning thing from golf, because golf, the best golfers have pretty good bad shots. Everybody's good shot on the tour is exactly the same. Everybody can do a good shot, but the good guys don't do very bad shots. They still do bad shots, but they don't hurt them. And kicking is the same. So how many times do you kind of not quite get hold of it, but it still goes over, and the drop goal that won the World Cup in 2003 was actually a slight mishit, but because it was J shape and followed along, it still went over. So it's come a long way, the lower tee. And I also think that we suffer, and you've heard me say this, because if you want it instantly, then put it on a cone and just whack it and it'll be all right. But if you had to kick 10 out of 10, I'm not sure you could do it. And you might be sore because you'd use your adductors, because you have to open your foot, and so it goes on. But the thing is, if you want to buy green bananas and be good at this, the quicker you get off the low tee, the quicker you can use your body as the control, the quicker you can use your quad, get the kicking foot down and follow along, the better kicker you'll be. And that follow along, believe it or not, is also the same with a drop goal. I've tried to image and wrap. So the drop punt is the same as the spiral, believe it or not, even though, and the goal kick is the same as the drop goal. And so if you can do that, you should be able to, it's a useful thing to try and goal kick off both feet. And then you can drop off both feet.
And again, which is, I think, obviously birthed in this idea that you've got elite athletes, or even semi-pro athletes who've got other jobs, or even kids who have got exams in school, and they only have so much time. So you want it to be potential maximizing, but also efficient within the constraints of reality and life. And it sounds like the low tee and that body weight shift and all that creates is actually a more efficient way. So if we can help you get onto that pathway, the sooner the better. It's better for all that we're trying to achieve, isn't it?
Well, it is, and also you once you get it, and it won't take very long, you will be incredibly accurate, and you can play around with the leaning of the ball. It can be slightly out, it can be slightly forward. You can play around with the sweet spot and so on. There's so much you can do on that, whereas the high tee tends to sit it up there and that's the end of it.
And the T is in prototype phase, isn't it, at the moment? And we will be releasing that in due course with a kind of instruction and video, and to actually help educate on body patterns and movements, as well as using the T, because obviously it all links together. But I think that's probably all we've got time for today for this first Kickers Club podcast. Thanks so much for being available and talking that through. It's great again to hear some of your journey as a teacher, as an educator, as a coach. And it's great to catch some of your latest thinking on areas of development. So thanks so much. And we'll be doing another pod shortly.
Thank you. And thank you very much for the questions that come in. Keep them coming. The more demanding, the more I like it. And it hopefully I can perhaps drop the little nugget that makes the big difference.